Today, we're going to trace the incredible story of English literature, right from its very beginnings. We're talking about a journey from the simple echo of a storyteller's voice all the way to the written words that would, well, literally change the world.
So think about that for a second. How does a story make it through the ages when there are no books, no printing presses, nothing written down? Well, it's because literature wasn't something you just read. It was a performance, a shared experience, something you heard and felt and remembered. And this is what the very first English literature was: oral poetry. We're talking epic tales of heroes and monsters and huge battles, all passed down from person to person, generation to generation. It wasn't text on a page, it was a living, breathing art form.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to go way back to the Anglo-Saxon world, the world of Old English. Now, this was a language that would sound totally foreign to us today, and its poetry had this unique and really powerful engine driving it.
So, forget about A-B rhymes. The secret sauce of Old English poetry was alliteration, the repetition of consonant sounds. This created this heavy, driving, percussive rhythm that was actually easy to memorize, and, let's be honest, pretty hypnotic to listen to. It was the drumbeat that carried the story.
And what's so cool is that even hundreds of years later, in what we call Middle English, you can still hear that old Anglo-Saxon engine running. Just listen to the sounds here. Summer's sacin, when soft was the sun. You hear that rhythm? That's a direct inheritance from the great oral poems like Beowulf.
And if you want the perfect example of this oral tradition, you've got to look at Beowulf. It's the classic traditional epic, right? A massive hero, terrifying monsters, and this story was told and retold around campfires for who knows how long before anyone ever thought to write it down.
And this timeline just lays it all out for us. You can see the shift happening right before your eyes. We start with these massive oral epics, like Beowulf. But then look, King Alfred kicks off the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. He's trying to create a written history. This is the exact moment literature begins its slow, steady crawl from sound onto the page.
All right, now things are about to get kicked into high gear, thanks to one of the most game-changing events in English history. A single military invasion that would completely reboot the language and the kind of stories it could tell.
Yep, we're talking about 1066. William the Conqueror and his Normans show up, and they bring their language, French, with them. And this collision between gritty Old English and elegant Norman French creates a brand new hybrid language that we now call Middle English.
And the difference was huge. Old English feels like a totally foreign Germanic language, but Middle English, that's the linguistic melting pot. Suddenly you've got all these French words mixing with the old Anglo-Saxon roots, creating this flexible, more expressive language. And that opened the door for totally new kinds of stories.
And one of the most exciting new forms was the miracle play. See, for centuries, Bible stories were locked up in the church, told in Latin that most people couldn't understand. But now, they were being acted out, in English, for everyone. This was revolutionary.
I mean, just look at this evolution. Literature is literally moving out of the church and into the streets. What starts as a tiny part of a Latin service becomes a full-blown public festival, performed on these rolling stages for the whole town to see. It was theater, a spectacle for the masses.
So we've got stories becoming more public, more varied, but who's actually telling them? The poets who created Beowulf, the writers of these miracle plays? They're all anonymous, which brings us to a really huge shift, the birth of the author as we know it.
For the first time ever, we start to see something like a literary canon taking shape. A sort of greatest hits list of major authors. Before this, the storyteller was just a channel for the story. Now the storyteller starts to get top billing. The individual artist is finally being recognized. And the first name on that list, the one who really cements his place, is Geoffrey Chaucer. This guy was a total game changer. He took this new, flexible Middle English and proved it could be a world-class literary language. And how did he do it? By focusing on something brand new: individual people.
And this is the key. In the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer isn't writing about some mythical hero from a bygone era. No, he is writing about his own society, the whole messy, vibrant cross-section of it. Knights, millers, merchants, nuns, and he gives every single one of them a unique, unforgettable, and deeply human voice. This is the beginning of individualism in literature.
Okay, but as we celebrate this amazing new focus on individual voices, we've got to ask a really important question. As this greatest hits list starts to get written, who's on it? And maybe more importantly, who's being left off?
Because when you look at the books that have survived from this period, it's pretty glaring. They're almost all written by men for an audience of men. So if we want to understand the women of this era, we're forced to look at how they show up in the stories that men were telling about them.
There's a modern tool that helps us do this, called feminist criticism. Think of it like putting on a new pair of glasses. It helps you see the unconscious biases and assumptions that are built right into these foundational stories, and it lets you read them from a completely different perspective.
And when you put those glasses on, wow, a pattern emerges. Female characters in these early stories often get squeezed into one of two boxes. They're either the perfect, idealized angel, or they're the evil, demonic temptress, saint or sinner. There was almost no room in between for a woman to just be a complex, real human being.
So this incredible journey from an Anglo-Saxon poet chanting in a mead hall all the way to Chaucer's incredibly detailed characters, this is what laid the groundwork for everything that came after. It basically created the world of books and authors that we live in today.
When you boil it all down, it's a story of transformation, a huge shift from a collective, shared, spoken experience to the private, personal act of reading a book. And that didn't just change literature. It changed how we share ideas, how we remember our past, and how we understand ourselves.
And that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. The stories that survive, the ones that made it onto the page, absolutely shape our world. But what about all the stories that didn't? For every voice we can read today, how many countless others were never written down and are just lost to time? It's a powerful reminder of how history itself gets made.